Let's go to the big board. NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki breaking down the numbers. And Steve, let's start there in the Republican Party. What did you see last night?
Yeah, I mean, look, overall here, there are still a few votes to come in Michigan. These numbers might change just a little bit. But Trump here, obviously 68%, Haley down at 26.5%. I think there's a couple things noteworthy about it. One, obviously, you had that Haley number in New Hampshire. She got 43%. In South Carolina, she got 40. She had made this 40%, the idea of a 40% in Republican primary, break from Trump for her. She made that a big part of her message. That falls now into the mid-20s last night. Why did it fall into the mid-20s after being around 40 in the first two contests? Well, with the contours of Haley's support, or for that matter, Trump's opposition in these Republican primaries so far, has been very clear demographically. It has tracked very closely with educational attainment, particularly among white voters. That is to say, white voters with at least a four-year college degree have been the most Trump-resistant and the most willing to go and vote for Nikki Haley. Add in white voters with college degrees who live in suburbs, who live in affluent areas. That is where we've seen Haley driving up her biggest numbers in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. Now, take it to Michigan last night. Where are those areas on this map? I'll show you a big one right here. This is Oakland County. This by itself is like 15% of the vote statewide in this primary. And you can see here Donald Trump by nearly 30 points over Nikki Haley. This is of the two major northern suburbs of Detroit, suburban counties. You got Oakland County and you got Macomb County. Macomb County is the classic blue-collar suburb built, sort of by the UAW, by the auto workers. That has been in the general election and in primaries Trump country. But Oakland County is the big white-collar suburb. Significant growth, higher incomes, higher levels of college degrees. Again, the exact kind of place where Nikki Haley was getting real good numbers in South Carolina and New Hampshire to bring her up to 40. She didn't do that last night here in Oakland County. This was one of her big opportunity counties if she wanted to replicate those earlier performances. Fell to just 33% here. I think even more striking for Haley, you look down in Washtenaw County, University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, affluence, all these things I'm talking about that are her demographic wheelhouse. And she couldn't even win her here. This is her best county in the state. Her absolute best county of Michigan's 83 counties is right here. She got 44.7, and that's only about a point and a half above what she got in New Hampshire statewide. So you could see just slippage here for Haley. And one other thing I think to keep an eye on, to keep in mind here, too, is significant to interpreting these primary results on the Republican side, I think, has been the rules so far in the three primaries where Trump and Haley have gone one-on-one. That is New Hampshire, that is South Carolina, and that is Michigan. And they have all allowed for the mass participation of non-Republican voters. And I think there's a lot of sort of suggestive evidence in the results so far that has been a significant part of Haley's support in these states. And it's something that can come, and a lot of it may very well be coming from non-Republicans who didn't vote for Trump in 2020, didn't vote for Trump in 2016, have no intention, as you were just talking about, of voting for Trump in 2024. But because the rules allow them to participate and because their energy to vote against Donald Trump is off the charts high, there's, I think, a lot of reason to suspect they're coming into these Republican primaries just for the chance to vote against Donald Trump. So in terms of what that means for November, I don't know. But I did think it's significant last night, as I said, that Haley fell from the low 40s down to the mid-20s. And if what I was just describing is or has been a phenomenon so far, it may be that it's cooling a bit as we get away from these contests like New Hampshire, where they had months to campaign, South Carolina, where they had a month. Now we're getting into the ones where they go, you're in for a day, you campaign, you go to the next state, you have multiple state primaries. Is that effect fading a bit? Because, again, in Michigan, no party registration. Anybody could vote in this primary yesterday. That was just the same rule you had in South Carolina, but a very different result.
So let's talk about the Democratic side for just a minute here. Steve, the story of the night, that uncommitted vote we did hear at the top of the show from the state's party chair inside the Democratic Party saying, we want to send a message here that policy and United States unconditional support of Israel needs to stop. They're calling for a full ceasefire, which isn't going to happen. But clearly making a point, but saying, look, we're not going to go vote for Donald Trump. He's proposed, again, a Muslim ban. So we're not going to vote for that guy, but something needs to change if you want our vote in November.
Yeah, so it's interesting. What you're seeing here actually are the delegate results. Now, I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, why I can't get the overall statewide vote up here. But the delegate vote is worth lingering on for a minute. Obviously, look, Joe Biden is taking currently all of the delegates that have been allocated, but all of the delegates have not yet been allocated in Michigan. And so while it is an overwhelming, I mean, the headline is an overwhelming victory for Joe Biden here, around 80% of the vote. But that question of uncommitted, we were talking about some very particular places. The two types of places we wanted to see how that was doing were, number one, places with large Arab American populations, large Muslim American populations, and then number two, places with large college populations, college students, college faculty and staff. We've seen all sorts of activism on college campuses against Joe Biden's Israel-Hamas policy. So would that translate into uncommitted votes in that kind of a place, too? So what were the test counties for this? The big one is the biggest one in the state, Wayne County, where Detroit is. And we don't have all the vote in Wayne County, but Detroit is not really the story in Wayne County. It's one city, Dearborn, which has 110,000 people and which is in Wayne County. And Dearborn is a majority Arab American county. It has the largest concentration per capita of Muslim Americans of any city in the United States. And what happened in Dearborn last night? Uncommitted beat Donald Trump in Dearborn last night by a 56 to 41% total, 15-point victory for uncommitted. Now, again, you see what that translates into county-wide, not much, but and I'll show you as well. That's Dearborn with a large Arab American population, and then you go next door to Washtenaw, which we were just talking about on the Republican side, University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, college faculty, all the factors we're talking about here, and uncommitted landing at about 17% right here in Washtenaw County. Now, when we get to that delegate question, okay, where it's 0 for uncommitted right now, the rules on the Democratic side are very different than the Republican side. All you have to do to start collecting delegates is hit 15% of the vote either statewide or within a congressional district in a state. And because that uncommitted vote, the strongest uncommitted vote, is concentrated in a relatively small geographic area, I just showed you, it's part of Wayne County and Washtenaw County. So what does this mean in terms of delegates? Well, there's a Washtenaw County-based congressional district, and it looks like, not for sure yet, but it looks like uncommitted is going to pick up a delegate there. And then Dearborn itself is entirely included in Michigan's 12th congressional district. That's where Rashida Tlaib represents in Congress. And again, based on that Dearborn showing, a delegate there, not been allocated yet, but certainly seems a distinct possibility. In the 13th district, which is a Detroit-based district, but also has a significant Arab Muslim American population, it looks like that 15% threshold could be cleared there. So we may, nothing official yet, but we may be in a situation where uncommitted does walk away with from this with 3 delegates to the Democratic National Convention. Now, that's a drop in the ocean when you're talking about the delegate race and everything, but that may be what the uncommitted side got out of this. And, of course, the big question, the question the uncommitted folks want people asking off this result is, hey, go back to, in 2020, it was a 150,000 vote margin in the state for Biden, but in 2016, Trump only won it by 11,000. And the uncommitted folks want Democrats to see those numbers and say, hey, that could make all the difference. Better get good with those voters.
And that uncommitted movement believes that it's made its point last night with a big number, moving on to Minnesota on Super Tuesday, Washington State, and some other places to continue to do that. NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, thanks as always. So
there are enough voters who understand the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But also, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have a record to run on. The uncommitted campaign is part of the process, right? Like, one of the reasons we wanted to be an early state was to give people the opportunity to have their voices heard early in this process. And that's what they've done. And you see this president's listening. Yesterday he started talking about a ceasefire. He's listening. When we participate like this in the primary, doesn't mean that they're not going to be voting for Joe Biden in November. We're going to roll this momentum into a victory in November for the president.
And that is the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party speaking with NBC News before yesterday's results came in for the state's primary. They're expressing confidence Democrats will turn out for Joe Biden in November, despite a sizable protest vote last night. As expected, President Biden did win the state of Michigan easily last night, but with more than 100,000 people casting ballots for uncommitted, mostly in protest over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. On the Republican side, Donald Trump racked up another big victory over Nikki Haley, but with some big warning signs for him there as well. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, February 28th. With us this morning, the host of Way Too Early, White House Bureau Chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay, columnist and associate editor for The Washington Post, David Ignatius, assistant managing editor and Washington Bureau Chief for The New York Times, Elizabeth Buemiller, and deputy managing editor for politics at Politico, Sam Stein. Good morning to you all. So, Joe, we're going to have Steve Kornacki. He's waiting over at the board, break down the numbers for us. But a couple of headlines, a big uncommitted vote against Joe Biden. But also, again, when you look at Donald Trump, Nikki Haley winning almost 300,000 votes in the state of Michigan, taking them away in the Republican Party from Donald Trump.
Well, and again, we talked about this yesterday. This is democracy. If there's a time that you're in Michigan and you want Donald Trump to be stopped, but you want to send a message to Joe Biden, you want to send a message to the White House regarding their position on the Middle East and Israel and Gaza, it's a perfect time to do it. And what did we hear? We heard the leader of the Michigan Democratic Party saying, this is what we're doing, and this is a wonderful time to do it. We are all aligned and want to see Donald Trump beaten and Joe Biden, want to see him win in the fall. The same can't be said, though, can it, Willie, for Donald Trump? He has over a quarter of the vote voting against him, and what you hear from supporters of Nikki Haley are that their votes are not transferable. They're not voting for Donald Trump. You hear time and again Republicans saying they're moving away from Trump. Also, it's important to remember all the people like me that were once members of the Republican Party that left, and people like me saying they would never vote for Donald Trump and never vote for anybody that ever supported Donald Trump for one day. So, again, you have a lot of people. This is a Republican Party that keeps shrinking because of Donald Trump. And even inside of that shell of the old Republican Party, you've got whether it's 25% or 30 or 40% saying they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. That's going to have impact in the fall.
Yeah, I mean, barring a seismic event, Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. But in state after state after state, yes, his margin last night was bigger over Nikki Haley than it's been. But her winning almost 300,000 votes tells you a lot about where the Republican Party is. That's a big chunk of the party, nearly 30% last night, saying we're not going along for the ride this time with Donald Trump. So where do those votes go in the general election is a big question.
You know, Sam, this is very simple. It's open primaries versus closed primaries. Yeah. And we've been saying all along, this election's going to be won not across the fruited plains of America. It's going to be won in the suburbs of Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee. And here we have in Detroit, again, I don't know, maybe people that run for office and are basically three-time incumbents, basically. Maybe they're happy losing 45% of their own party's vote in one county in the suburbs and 33% another. But I will tell you, I would be hiding under the sheets if I were a politician and those were the results the next day. In the area I have to win Michigan and win the presidency. Right. These are flashing red lights for Donald Trump. And these people can whistle past the graveyard all they want. They can insult Nikki Haley all they want. Donald Trump can talk about how badly he's going to beat Barack Obama in the fall all he wants. These aren't good numbers.
Barack Obama. Yes, I think they are warning signs for obvious reasons. I mean, Donald Trump, he's dependent on one thing really right now, which is Joe Biden not being able to turn out the vote, because Donald Trump he clearly has a ceiling, right? Mm-hmm. He's not making overtures to win over these voters. He's not even trying to be nice or magnanimous to Nikki Haley. He didn't mention her for a day, but he went back to attacking her on Sunday. It's not a campaign that's trying to expand the tent. It's a campaign that is what it is. It's Donald Trump. So his path to the general election really depends on Biden's coalition kind of fracturing and falling apart, and it's kind of a race to the bottom there. It will be in the suburbs if that's the case. Mm-hmm. That's where the election will come down to, because frankly, that's the main competition between the two. And Donald Trump, for 2 cycles now, has lost the suburbs over and over again, and Republicans too. So what are they doing about it? And frankly, I haven't seen much from the Republican Party to try to fix this. If anything, what you've seen Well, I don't know if I want to say that, because the response to the IVF ruling, for instance, shows that they recognize they have a problem. The question is, what will they do about it? And I don't know quite yet what they're going to do about it legislatively or politically, because the course correction will not come from Trump.
Well, let me tell you, if I'm wanting to unite a party and I think in the end I'm going to win, you go out and you say, Nikki Haley, wow, let's give her a hand. She's an incredible candidate, and man, I'm going to want her to be part of my administration.
If
she'll be that, no. What I'm doing here is what politicians have done for thousands of years.
It's called expanding the coalition, yes.
It's called winning, right? And so he can't do it. And so, no, he's not being nice. He's not being magnanimous. And let's stay, by the way, on the powder blue side, the spring side of the morning show table this morning. The stylish side of our DC Bureau. Let's stay there. Elizabeth, though, I want us to stop for just 1 minute, because since Donald Trump came onto the scene in June 2015, you have a Republican doing something that no other Republican has done. Let me give Nikki Haley her due. We all should. I know, yes, she should have done this before. She should have done that before. But Nikki Haley is taking the incoming from Donald Trump, as Barack Obama would motion. She's doing that, and she's going state by state by state. This is something Marco Rubio is too much of a coward to do. This is something that Rand Paul was too much of a coward to do. We can take it all the way through 2024. Nikki Haley's keeping her head down, and she's saying, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going harder at him, and let's see what happens. Donald Trump hasn't had to deal with that yet in his political career.
And he is not taking it well.
No.
I mean, she's really tough, tougher than the men have been so far. She has enough money to go for some time at least. And she's, doesn't look good for her this year, but obviously she's looking to 2028. And the other thing I wanted to say about Donald Trump, not only is he not being nice to her, he's being, the things he has said about her husband, about her marriage. I mean, it is a new low, even for Donald Trump, the way he is going after her personally, and her husband, who is, a veteran, he's
serving something Donald Trump would not know anything about.
So that is what is kind of extraordinary.
Yeah, Mr. Bones.
And the other thing, of course, I know we've discussed this before, but in South Carolina, what was so interesting, he was supposed to win by 30 points. He won by 20. Okay, still a lot of big votes. But so many of Nikki Haley's voters said they would never vote for Donald Trump, like 60%. So that, again, big warning sign for him.
Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, President Biden won easily in Michigan. The only real opposition he faced came from voters casting ballots for uncommitted, protesting his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Now, joining our conversation this hour, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, Washington Post opinion editor and writer Alexi McCammond, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Ford. Jonathan Lemire, Caddy Kay, still with us as well, Joe.
Peter Baker, Joe Biden gave up maybe 12, 13%. You had Barack Obama in 2012 give up about 11%. I don't see panic inside the White House. They feel like they still have a way to go here. But what do they think they need to do between now and November to win those voters back?
They just got to end the war. That's as simple as that. They got to end the war. The problem for them is the timetable they thought this was going to play out on has not played out the way they wanted. They hoped that the war in Gaza would be over in January, so that by summer we'd be on to reconstruction and peacemaking, and the voters who were mad at them, particularly younger voters and obviously Arab American voters, would be less mad, at least, and maybe less likely to vote against them as a result. Maybe focused on the things that Biden hopes to bring to the region and make things better for the Palestinians. They're not on that timetable. Israelis and Bibi Netanyahu are not cooperating in that regard. That's why you heard the president on Monday, I was with him in New York, say at an ice cream shop of all places that he thought a ceasefire was in the works, and almost here, partly because he wants to believe it. And it may not be true, but maybe it is. If it is, then maybe they can get past this moment and begin to shift away from the anger these voters feel. But for the moment, that's the biggest thing.
Well, and it's actually in Israel's best interest that they get to that point, Alexi. The reason why is we were talking about it last hour. This is not just about Arab American voters in Michigan.
Yeah.
If Israelis are looking upon American politics with contempt, going, oh, they're going to sacrifice our security for a couple of votes in Michigan. No, this is about the fact that the cause of Israel is losing a generation.
Right.
It's not an overstatement. You look at the numbers, and you look how younger Americans, in a shocking way, have turned away from Israel and are very aggressively supporting the Palestinian cause and supporting some pretty extreme positions.
I mean, and I've watched in real time. My younger sister is out in Seattle. She's 27 and, you know, has got a bunch of liberal friends out there. And literally, I watched over time from the beginning of the war on their Instagram stories and other social media. It was in the beginning sort of just more informative what's going on. Very quickly changed to being pro-Palestinian. Look at what's happening. This is a genocide. Can you believe that we're supporting this? You cannot vote for anyone who uses our taxpayer dollars to support something like this. And it's continuing through this day, and that is what is so shocking to me, is how many young people are posting about these causes and about genocide and foreign policy day in and day out, interspersed with other things, right, that they're interested in, like Love is Blind on Netflix or some other meme, but they're literally still talking about this. The more fascinating thing to me is when you look at Biden's TikToks or the Instagram posts that they're doing with influencers, and they're like, oh my gosh, 250 million people saw this post. Look at the comments. They're young people being like, hey, what about these 2 Palestinian journalists who were killed? Do you have anything to say about that? Or what about what's going on in Rafah? Do you have something to say about that? They're not only holding these folks accountable, they're educating other young people who are going to the comments who might not know, being like, oh, wait a second, let me look that up.
So, Joe, let's talk about Israel-Gaza, first of all. You know, it is, so many Americans have traditionally supported Israel. We've been Israel's strongest supporter since 1948. At the same time, younger voters, not just in West Virginia, but across the country, turning on Israel because what they're seeing in Gaza. What's the best way forward for America?
The best way forward, when I talk to people, I said, first of all, do you agree that Hamas is a terrorist organization? Do you understand the definition of a terrorist organization? When usually civilized countries have disagreements and go to war, there's the rules of war. And most countries use their war machines to protect their people. Terrorist organizations use their people to protect their war machines. And this is a horrible situation when there are women and children, what we're seeing, the carnage. And that is their mode of operandum. If they want a ceasefire, then release the hostages. That gives you all the negotiating power you need. Release all the hostages, demand a ceasefire, and sit down and see if you can work it out. If you can't, then we understand what will happen. But at least try. It's unreasonable for them, Hamas, to believe that there's going to be a ceasefire until they do something and come to the table. You know, they have not wanted a two-state solution. They have never come to the table to recognize a two-state solution.
How important is a two-state solution when you have Hamas, who has spent since 2005 working against it, since they've been in power, killing people that actually have talked about working with Jews. And you also have Netanyahu, who spent the past 10 years fighting against a two-state solution. How do we get there?
It's hard for any of us in America to put ourselves in that position. I think about West Virginia. If Ohio declared war on West Virginia, you know, and they continue to berate us and attack us and do things of that sort, what would you do? How would you defend that? What would cause them to stop? So you start thinking of something in your backyard. How would you settle it? Well, if a person has a commitment that they're going to destroy you no matter what, no matter where or when, that's their determination, they're not going to ease up. Then you're not going to sit down and have a good conversation and say, okay, this is how we're going to draw the peace lines. It has to be a willing solution by both. And if you have a terrorist organization who you're trying to negotiate with a civilized society, it just doesn't work. Unless the Arab world, the Muslim world steps forward. They're going to have to step forward in that part of the world. We cannot, as Americans, bring that peace. We can help negotiate a peace, but we can't bring it to them, and we can't maintain it unless they want it.
Yesterday, in the Oval Office, you had the leaders. It was basically everybody versus Mike Johnson, who's not exactly sure what he wants, other than not to upset MTG and a couple of backbenchers in the House. Could you talk about the damage that Mike Johnson and Donald Trump and those who are opposing aid to Ukraine are inflicting on not only the people of Ukraine, but on Western democracy right now?
We were talking just a little bit before you came back on and discussing it's a moment of time. Every elected official has that moment of time when you ask yourself, what's my purpose of serving? Is my purpose of serving to protect myself and my political future, or do my job and stand tall? I've come to the conclusion we need term limits. I've come to that conclusion. I never had before, and I've come to it's the only way we're going to get any type of performance. And I come to the conclusion, Joe, because I was doing a town hall in southern West Virginia, and a lovely elderly lady stood up, and she was 10, 15 years ago telling me why I should do it. And I was telling her why I thought, well, you lose a lot of experienced people and this and that. And she says, Joe, think about it. If we had term limits, maybe we get one good term out of you. I was sold. I had no comeback. I had no defense. She was correct, and more correct today. But Mike Johnson, you know, it's a moment of time. It's a moment in history for him to make a decision. What's my purpose of serving the good people of Louisiana? Why did I come here? To serve my country and take an oath of office to defend and protect the Constitution. Mike, you got a chance to rise up, to be a hero in the annals of history. To do it and do it the right way. And if they can't come together, this purity test, Joe, you know how that is. The purity test, you got to have 218 Democrats.
Right.
If you have a majority, they all got to vote. If 218 Democrats don't vote, we don't pass anything.
Right.
If 218 Republicans, those days are gone. The country's too divided, and right now you have to build coalitions. If they get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, we're going to lose democracy as we know it, because it forces us to give them a piece of legislation that can weather the test of time. In the House, they always give us something hot. Paul Ryan and I were talking the other night. He says, Paul, we always expect to get something hot from you. And you always expect us to tone it down a little bit and give it back to you, something you can swallow and it'll last the test of time. That's what we are. And he can't come to that grips. And if you're going to have 5 or 10 people that's going to be the tail wagging the dog, I don't know if I'd want to be the head of the dog. Yeah.
Senator, you walked in this morning. I don't know if it's the lilac tie or something. You're looking fresh.
Well, it's definitely my neutral. You know, it's just my neutrality. That's for sure.
Relaxed and happy, and talking moments of time. Yeah. You and I had a conversation a while ago, but when you were planning what to do with your future, and you pointed to the unpopularity of the president, you pointed to the unpopularity of Donald Trump, and you were weighing at that point whether you would run yourself on a third-party ticket. You've decided not to. What was the thing that pushed you to make that decision? What was the final straw?
As you come down to it, I've said this, I love my country too much to ever support or vote for Donald Trump. I was very honest. I've known him, I've tried to work with him, and I just come to the conclusion that's going to be impossible. So with that, I've known Joe Biden for a long time. We've been friends, and I think Joe's been pushed too far to the left. I'm just trying to do everything I can to move him back a little bit to center left. And I think that's where 55 to 60% of the people. My daughter started a 501c4, which is Americans Together. We have found out going around the country, this is where the power is. They just don't know it. They don't know how to use it because there's nothing organized. They're either forced to go left or right. Pick your side. Well, there's only one side, the American side. There's not a Democrat or Republican side when it comes to defending the Constitution. And that's what we're trying to do and get people understanding that power. I came to the conclusion I never wanted to be a spoiler, and I think I said that from day one. I will never put myself to be a spoiler or a handicap at one side or the other. I wouldn't do that. And I just didn't feel comfortable. It was the right time to see a difference of what I could have a clear path forward to try to unite the country, other than being a spoiler or taking votes or harming one side or being accused of saying, well, you threw it this way, you threw it that way. That's not what I wanted to do. And I got to that point, I had to come to that conclusion.
So, Senator, the president is running against a challenger who has been impeached twice, facing 91 felony counts, talks about retribution, talks about terminating the Constitution. And the president of the United States is running even at best behind in a lot of polls to Donald Trump. What's the one most important thing he could do? If you were suddenly tomorrow made in charge of his campaign and he brought you in and said, Joe, I'm going to do exactly what you want me to do, what is the one thing you would tell him to do?
Well, I would tell him to take credit for what we have. He's not able to speak. I don't think you've ever heard. We did the IRA bill. We wrote that bill. And the IRA bill was done for a couple of reasons. First of all, energy security. We couldn't help our allies. We're producing more energy today than ever before, more oil, more gas. He can't speak about that because he's afraid of losing the far left. But on the same time, we're investing more in clean technology for the future than at any time in history. And that's all they talk about. So you're not going to get credit if you don't look at the whole ball of wax. So we're producing more energy today. We're producing more LNG to help our foreign allies. They don't have to go back to Russian oil. Russia weaponized energy. It's a fact. Energy is what it takes to have a secured country. If you're not energy dependent and your foreign supply chains are not reliable, you've got serious problems. So I'm just saying, and then also you never heard the White House talk about, we paid down $230 billion of debt. Out of a $690 billion bill, $230 went towards debt. Never talked about that, and debt is runaway. We've got to get control of our finances. And on top of that, health care. In West Virginia, the $35 for insulin helped tremendously. Putting a cap, next year there won't be a senior in Medicare that pays more than $2,000 out of pocket. Some of these drugs they're buying are $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year. This is tremendous. You have to look at everything. It's a homogenous type of approach that we took, and the president's not getting credit. He signed the bill. It wouldn't have come law without him. We worked with them. They understood what was in the bill. But I can't get them and their climate people in Washington, at the White House, is pushing him so far left that it's hard for them to take credit of what we're doing. We're producing more. We're helping more people around the world. We're doing it cleaner than anywhere in the world. And people that just want to leave it in the ground. They don't think we should be producing energy. And then you have Donald Trump saying, well, Joe Biden's administration is destroying the energy of our country. We are producing more energy than him or any other former administration has ever done.
Right.
And we're doing it better.
So let me ask you, Joe, about just how deeply dysfunctional Washington is, and your thoughts about having Republicans like James Langford. You know James, one of the most conservative.
He's the best of the best. James Langford is the best of the best, and I've said that.
He's phenomenal. One of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate from Oklahoma. He does a bill working with Democrats, the White House, everybody. Toughest border security bill ever.
Best I've ever seen.
And the House kills it.
And here's the thing, and I asked James, I said, James,
Republicans kill it, Trump kills it.
They look for something. The perfect is the enemy of the good, and if you're looking never to be for something, I said, if you want to retire in Washington, and you want someone just drive you around, take care of you and everything as a congressperson or a senator, vote no. Just vote no. Be against everything because it wasn't good enough. And guess what? You don't have to explain being not good enough. You don't have to explain of what it could have done. You can explain of what it would have done. And that's what they do. And the perfect is always the enemy of the good. I was doubtful if my dear friend James would get to where he could agree on something. But he did a heck of a job. And we went through it. I talked to him, the asylum, border asylum. And I've said this. If President Biden and his administration is guilty as charged for the border that we have today, he did that in a humanitarian way, thinking the world is in flux. We're coming out of a pandemic. There's poor people being displaced around the world. Let's try to help some. That was his reasoning that I was told. And with that, I understand that. But then there became a time when we got overrun, and they didn't shut it down quick enough. He's come to the conclusion he's willing to do it now. And they're saying, well, it's only for politics. No. It's the real crime here is for my Republican colleagues and my good friends. I was never more disillusioned. And, Kathy, that might have been one of the things when I saw what happened on that Sunday, when I saw my friends who demanded that we have border security before we give any aid to anybody. And I agreed with them. I was one of the few Democrats that says they're right. We have to take care of our border if we're going to help other people's borders. So that's what we did. We had a bill. They finally came out with it. And then they said, I think I'm okay with that. And then, well, I have some concerns. And then by the third day, I can't vote for it. And walked away. I was never more disillusioned of saying, I don't think we can fix what's wrong in Washington. So that's why that was one of my big reasons I decided. And where we are right now at the border, for President Trump to say, hey, I don't think we should fix it right now because it's not good for my campaign. It's not good for my election.
It's unbelievable.
That's as guilty, if not worse, than what was done through trying to help people humanitarian and didn't stop it soon enough. So there's blame all the way around, and we can fix this. The United States of America is the only person who can fix the problems. We are the only country that can really screw up royally and come back and fix it because we have the people, we have the rule of law, we have the judiciary system that we have, and we have good people that want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
What we found out, Joe, the country is not as divided as Washington wants you to believe.
It's not.
The business model in Washington is to make you pick a side and divide you and say, okay, that's the enemy. Fight to your death now. That has never been our mode of operandum.
It's just not the case. Hey,
The question is,
Justice, radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Keep yapping, man.
Who
would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Look here.
Oh, really?
Really?
Here's the thing. I sent in the U.S. Marshals to get the killer of the young man in the middle of the street. They shot him. And for 3 days,
President Trump
Portland wouldn't do anything.
Would you close down the
By
oil
the way, I
would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I will
that's a big
transition.
statement.
The oil industry pollutes significantly.
I see.
And here's the deal. But
That's
you
a
can't
big
do that.
statement.
Well, if you let me finish the statement,
Trying
I
to
have
respond.
never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did. Show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website. The fact of the matter is
Show
he's
the website.
flat lying.
Not since Abraham Lincoln has anybody done what I've done for the black community. Now, you have done nothing other than the crime bill, which put...
Oh, God.
Oh, God is right. I'm telling you, why debate that guy? First of all, he doesn't debate anybody else. He doesn't debate Republicans. He doesn't debate Nikki Haley. He doesn't debate anybody. As the Wall Street Journal opinion page said a couple weeks ago, what's Trump going to do? Say, oh, Joe Biden, he's afraid to debate me when Donald Trump has been living in the fear of debating Nikki Haley now for months. Second thing is the guy just lies. He makes stuff up all the time. So, you know, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, Alexi, in your piece, you write in part this. I rewatched the 2020 Trump-Biden debate moderated by Chris Wallace and only confirmed to me that Biden shouldn't do it again. My neck was sore from shaking my head so much. Skipping a debate with Trump, which, to be clear, is not something the Biden campaign has proposed doing, would be consistent with the selective media strategy so far. It's also true that debates serve a useful purpose. Kathleen Hall Jamieson passionately made a case for them in her 2012 post-op-ed, arguing debates and other televised presentations are conducive to honestly explaining some more complex topics. Still, I'm not convinced another Trump-Biden debate would be worth it. When Trump's on the stage, anxious voters can't expect much honest explanation about anything. They also can't understand, they can't expect any rational discussion of the issues that are the most important to them.
Those clips you showed now, I mean, I'm like stressed internally from the crosstalk. I'm like, I hate conflict. I hate this. But you can barely even get a word in edgewise. I could barely understand what they're discussing. When Joe Biden would try to answer a question in good faith, Trump would give him maybe 3 to 5 seconds and then jump in with something totally derailing it. He's more erratic than ever before, Trump. The Hunter Biden issue, the trials, the investigations, every other word from Trump would be screaming about Hunter Biden, the corrupt Biden family. It would be a disaster for everyone and not helpful to any voters. Plus, people know their characters. I think a debate between Trump and Biden would mostly just show their personality and character at this point, and everybody knows exactly who these two men are, so we don't need 2 excruciating hours of them yelling over each other.
And Peter Baker, with Donald Trump, he has become more erratic. He has become more radical. He has become louder over the past several years and plays by absolutely no rules. And it seems to me, if you're going to have a debate that enlightens and informs, you have to have 2 people. Let's go back to 2012. You have to have Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, who will at least follow basic guidelines so people can learn about the issues and the candidates. We would not have that here with Donald Trump.
Part of the problem is that a debate is meant to test candidates and to show whether they have command of the issues and to force them to answer questions that are uncomfortable. So if we don't have a debate, fine, but are there going to be other opportunities for us to do that with these 2 people, these 2 men? And that's a real problem because neither one of them, frankly, is taking questions from hard questioners. Of course, Donald Trump did give an interview to Kristen Welker for Meet the Press, and Joe Biden has from time to time given interviews to Stephanie Ruhle and others from this network, for instance. But broadly speaking, neither one of them is doing the kind of interviews and taking questions in a hard way from reporters that previous generations have, and that's a real problem.
And that matters because I've gotten emails from readers who are like, I'd love to see a Trump-Biden debate because I want to see just how much or whether each man has mentally declined since 2020. And I think that's something else that people could potentially glean from a debate like that. But I mean, Biden is older, not necessarily as sharp as he was in 2020. I think it would be a little more difficult to keep up with someone like Trump this time around, who, as we have said, is more erratic, more unpredictable, and views something like this as not an exchange of ideas or defense of his own ideas, but sort of like a backyard brawl.
Willie, it'd be a couple of hours of insults. And again, if you're Donald Trump's team, if you're Donald Trump, what are you going to say if Joe Biden is like, no, I'm not gonna get down in the mud with the pigs here. I'm not gonna debate. What's he gonna say when Chris Christie was calling Donald Trump a coward debate after debate after debate for Donald Trump being afraid to debate Chris Christie. What's he going to say when Nikki Haley is saying, challenge him to one debate after another debate after another debate, and he's afraid to debate them too? He can't just decide after saying no to 16, 20, 30 debates that, oh, wait, now I want to debate this one time. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, refusing again and again, in this case, to debate Nikki Haley, thinking he's punching down in some way. He thinks he's already wrapped up the nomination, but perhaps it's more likely that she's smart, experienced, nimble, young, vital, all the things that maybe he's not, and might run circles around him in a debate. And to Alexi's point, John, that was the clips we just watched were 3.5 years ago. Those two men were 3.5 years sharper, perhaps, than they are now. Is the White House, is the Biden campaign expecting debates this fall?
Yeah, both men look different today than they did in those clips from 3.5 years ago. I think there's an expectation of debate probably does not happen. First of all, Trump and his turned the Republicans along with him against the debate commission, suggesting they were biased against them. They had rigged previous debates. Remember this nonsense about the microphone, and of course there was, and then last time around, because he got COVID and there was a real suggestion that he had COVID in that first debate. So therefore the committee tried to make the second one remote. He said no. So there's a lot of bad blood there between Trump. We'll see if that would even happen. It might have to be under the umbrella of a different organization. That would be complicated. The Biden people I talked to do think that if Trump says he's going to debate, and if he really goes through with it, and Trump has said he wants to, they probably have to. They feel like that it would look like he's ducking them. And also just because Biden and Democrats are just for the, fancy themselves, Joe, on like the side of good, and debates are good inherently for an election. They're the defenders of democracy. We should have debates. That the Biden would sort of be boxed in, would probably have to go through with a debate if Trump really wants one. But they certainly have ways out of it, as you just listed, to say that, well, this guy hasn't participated in any debates. Why should we give him that opportunity? But I think, Joe, there's a sense that the people I've talked to in the Biden campaign think that at the end of the day, Trump will blink and it won't actually happen.
Well, I think Trump could blink. You go back, and if I'm running Trump's campaign, God help me, and I'm not saying this, I'm not being facetious. I'm very concerned about a guy that goes out at night, gives a speech in front of a friendly crowd, and he can't remember who he ran against in 2016. He can't remember who he ran against in 2020. He can't remember who he's running against in 2024. He chokes the name Obama out of his mouth and then comes back to it because it's the only name that his brain can retain. Of course, we know what happened when he started. He's like, Nikki. And then went on, again, did the same sort of thing where he sort of choked her last name out, went on to talk, and then he came back to Nikki Haley, who he thought was Speaker of the House. Caddy, maybe they bluff, maybe the Trump team bluffs. But it just takes something like that with Donald Trump, who seems far more prone to making these type of mistakes. Because if Joe Biden says Mexico instead of Egypt, he completes the thought and he comes back and he's explaining the process and he comes back to Egypt and Sisi. That's something that Donald Trump's not been capable of doing. And you go back and you look at debates. 1976, Gerald Ford makes the blunder on Poland. It may have cost him the presidency. 88, Michael Dukakis finished himself off for good when he had that answer about Kitty Dukakis from Bernie Shaw. I think they're trying to protect Trump a bit more because he goes out and he loses train of thought and starts saying really stupid things. So I'm not so sure you're going to have the Trumpers eager to have this debate.
I mean, one thing that a debate with Trump is never going to be, Alexi, is an honest explanation of complex topics. That's not going to happen. And what is the Trump campaign worried about? When I speak to them, they feel like they're in a good place in terms of their lining up policies. They think their operation is getting better. They've got a plan for the first 100 days, which they didn't have first time around. The one thing they're worried about, Donald Trump. They're worried about the kinds of things that might come out of his mouth. Well, if he's in a debate situation like we saw him just there, getting exercised and emotional, that is when Donald Trump says things like Nikki Haley's a bird brain, or, he denigrates people, or he's rude about people, or he throws out gratuitous, offensive things. That's what his campaign is worried about him doing on the stump anyway, because who does that alienate? all of those suburban voters we were talking about in the first half of the show
and
from Philadelphia and Atlanta.
By the way,
and
Katie,
Detroit.
he mangles the English language when he's reading the teleprompter.
Yeah, he does.
He loses his train of thought and gets lost even when he's reading the teleprompter.
And to some extent, he's always done that, and his diehard supporters forgive him for that anyway. I think it's the gratuitous, offensive things that he says that particularly worry the campaign in terms of turning off suburban women voters.
Yeah.
And in a high, tense debate situation, that's where he could do that. That's where Biden, if he was on form and quick enough, could goad him into doing something like that.
Let's get to Washington, because less than an hour from now, Hunter Biden will appear before the House committees investigating his father, the President of the United States, as part of their impeachment inquiry. The closed-door interview comes after House Republicans had threatened to hold him in contempt. Republicans are in search of direct evidence so far that has eluded them that the president was involved in Hunter's foreign business dealings. Joining us now, Democratic member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Jared Moskowitz of Florida. He will be in the room during the deposition. Congressman, thanks for being here. What do you expect to see inside that room about an hour from now?
Well, look, I'm sure there'll be about 20 members in the room, obviously counsel for Democratic oversight, counsel for Republican oversight, and then Hunter Biden will be there with his own counsel. So we're finally here now at the moment Republicans have been trying to get to after they invited him to a public committee hearing and then took away that invitation. Now we're finally at the deposition phase. I mean, listen, this impeachment of Joe Biden, the impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden is literally on life support. Every one of their informants has proven to be a liar. 2 of them have been indicted, one of them for trying to sell, being a Chinese foreign agent and selling Iranian oil, the other actually being a stooge for Russian intelligence and duping my colleagues across the aisle with that 1023 form nonsense. So, look, you know, we'll see what happens after today. I expect my colleagues to go to the microphone and say, you know, today is the smoking gun, which they've been saying for a year every time they sit down and have a deposition. But my hope is that this is the conclusion of the Joe Biden impeachment inquiry, because there is no evidence whatsoever. Hunter Biden has done some things incorrect with the tax issue and with the gun issue. He's going to have to deal with that. But that has nothing to do with Joe Biden as the president of the United States.
As you say, the 2 star witnesses ago, I believe, is still a fugitive from the law, turned out to be an agent of the Chinese government, an arms trafficker selling oil in the Middle East as well. The most recent star witness, Mr. Smirnov, is now under arrest. The FBI says he made up everything he said about the President of the United States getting a $5 million bribe. That was talked about ad nauseum on certain news networks and by certain members of your committee. So what is the case now, as you talk to members on the committee, on the Republican side? What is their case? What are they going on now?
They have no case. And they've had no case from the beginning, and now it's been exposed that they have no case. Look, if they could impeach Hunter Biden, they would. They would love to impeach Hunter Biden. But they can't. So what they're going to do is they're going to prosecute Hunter in the press. They're going to do that, in my opinion, until the election. But this has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden doing anything incorrect. It's why the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden is ridiculous. And they don't even have the votes. Even Chairman Comer kind of admitted that. And so this is literally all about trying to hurt Joe Biden's poll numbers in the press by constantly talking about the mistakes of his son. But there is no link to Joe Biden, no matter how many times they run the Newsmax and spread Russian disinformation that they've been given. This has nothing to do with the President of the United States. No evidence on Joe Biden. I expect to have 8 or 9 or 10 hours of this trying to get Hunter Biden to make some sort of mistake. But this is the end. This should be the end of this nonsense.
Congressman, it might not be the end of this nonsense, though, because Republicans are also subpoenaing Special Counsel Robert Hur to come on in to talk about his investigation about classified documents. We know that President Biden cleared of any wrongdoing, but the way the report was written raised the political questions of whether President Biden was up for the job. And the White House certainly objects to what they deemed the gratuitous comments from Hur. As that approaches, what will be the Democrats' strategy heading into those hearings?
Well, listen, if they're going to bring the special counsel up here to talk about the editorializing of his report about Joe Biden's age, expect Democrats to come with all of the ammunition of the last 8 years of things that President Trump has said, like his wife is named Mercedes just last week, or messing up the leaders of Hungary. We will be prepared with all of that. So if this is going to be a test that Joe Biden is too old and Republicans are going to try to do that in committee, Democrats are going to show, all the mistakes that Trump has made, like saying, Biden will declare World War II, which happened in the 40s. All of that stuff is going to come out. We're held to a different standard. When Joe Biden says something that is a mistake, all of a sudden, it's a story for a week. When Donald Trump says it, it's only a story for a minute, mainly because he says it's so constant. And so, we're going to hold everybody to the same standard here. That's what Democrats are going to do.
All right, Democratic member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.